This is Spoil Me, covering the Dandelion Dynasty, Book 2, The Wall of Storms, chapters 26, 27, 28, and 29. In these chapters, the gods interfere. Again, they are fond of doing that. And they let Thera know, indirectly, how to undo a lot of her mother's work. I am super duper interested in what her mother is going to make of all this. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Thank you to Kyle for commissioning this episode. Kyle is in the chat and he says, get hyped, y'all. This and Tuesday's chapters are going to be wild. Yeah, these chapters, I didn't think that things were as dire as it turns out they are with Firo. Firo's got some real fucking battles happening. And I thought that they were dealing with some kind of rogue elements that were getting more powerful, but I didn't know that we were straight up dealing with armies that were organized and attacking fortresses, castles, palaces. I didn't know we were at that level yet. So I am extremely surprised at how much things have already progressed. And I didn't get the impression that Kuni realized how much things had progressed either. Also, Gia, girl, what are you doing? Gia, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't know. Maybe it'd be all right. So, I'm over here thinking that what Gia is doing is putting in place either the mechanisms for her son to take over. I don't think for Thera to take over. But it looks like what she's really doing is organizing things so that she herself can take over. And I may be wrong about this, but that's certainly how it appears at this point. And I want to say out of the gate, I don't think Gia would make a terrible ruler. I actually agree a lot with her stances on things. She's obviously kind of anti-globalist capitalist. She is in favor of education and kind of doesn't have a lot of time for the way that the nobles have made themselves important. There is a lot about the way that she approaches things that I fucking get and agree with and think her heart is in the right place. On the other hand, the means that she has taken to accomplish what she is doing, I am not sure I can look past that. Because she just straight up puts these poor people in the crosshairs. The mirror makers are the ones that I'm thinking of right now, and has them set up to do her a favor, essentially. Their mirror making is behind everything and is the motivator for this war. And then she just murders them. And they aren't the only ones. There are many people who have been pawns of hers, whom she has then murdered and not really seem to be brokenhearted about, or it's not interrupting her sleep at night is what I'm saying. So while a lot of me kind of feels for what it is that she claims to represent, I am not convinced that in practice, she actually does represent those things. It's it's one thing to say that you care about the little people, but then when you go and exploit them for a skill that they have and then murder them and their entire family, burn down their shop and make sure that nobody knows the mystery of how it all was created. You claiming that you give a shit about little people, it just feels really hollow. I don't know. It's one of those, like, I understand that there are times where you have to make sacrifices, but when it's sacrifice that you are making that people are aware of, that's one thing. These are people who they don't know what it is they're participating in. She's not giving them a choice. There is no consent, you know? And so it is not the same as like a bunch of people being killed on a battlefield who volunteered to fight. This is a bunch of people just trying to live their lives and fulfill an order that was given to them by an empress. I don't know if they know that the empress is the one who gave them the order or not, but nevertheless, and then they are, for all of their skill, their reward is to be murdered. Yikes. Kyle says, also on Tuesday, we should probably know the release date for book 3. Oh, shit. That's exciting. And then he says, she's not wrong about a lot of things, but she's fucking over a lot of the characters we also like. Yeah, and it's like, while, you know, I'm not somebody who's like, for the most part, just because I like a character, I'm not always going to be like defending them. I am okay, even interested to see sometimes. If somebody is choosing to fuck over somebody that I have grown to admire and like, part of me is sort of like, well, I just kind of want to see what happens now. I'm just interested in how this works out. But when it comes to the way that she is choosing to handle things, I don't entirely trust her now. And I don't like feeling that way, because the idea of a really like ruthless woman who decides to kind of set her husband up so that she can take power appeals to me deeply. I am about it. But this sort of like, what's the word I want? There's a minimizing of the importance of everyone else that makes me really saddened. You know, the way that she can just throw away these lives. And it appears that Otho is the only one who seems to be fucked up over this. And Otho, I am not convinced that she even cares about him anymore. He is willing to do whatever needs doing and not say a word to anybody. And as far as I can tell at this point, that's what his value is for her, is that he is a very willing tool who is deeply loyal, and she needs that. But as far as her like loving him, I don't know that's a thing anymore. And in that respect, I also hate this because I don't really like particularly care about Otho as a person, but I hate seeing somebody who is in love with another person and who is like so loyal as to do things that are against their own moral code. I hate to see that that person's love is not even reciprocated, you know? It's just a painful thing to watch. Somebody sort of like undo themselves, because that's kind of what I feel like is happening to him. He is out here, you know, murdering people and feeling like nauseated by what it is that she's asking him to do. And that's going to eat away at his conscience forever. I'm almost thinking that after he finishes doing everything that she needs, that she could kill him and be okay with that. And I mean, how completely depressing is that? It's just so, I don't want to think that she's capable of that, but there's nothing that I've seen so far that indicates to me that she wouldn't be. And it's kind of ironic because everybody is, you know, talking about, Kikomi, is that her name? With the legend of her like being in love and doing something really rash and foolish. And I wonder if Otho Kryn will ever wind up getting that treatment. If he is murdered because he like carried out her orders here, are there going to be songs written about him being lovesick and just like doing whatever it was that his lover asked him to do, and how he like basically like sold his soul for her? Because that feels accurate to me, to be honest. But anyway, I'm going to get ahead of myself. So we start off chapter 26 with the gods talking to each other. And it's Tututika who was the one that went and spoke to Thera already at the dock and like tried to explain to her about how light works and that it's like waves and the way that the ripples affect things. But Tututika can tell that Thera hasn't really quite gotten it. And so she asks Fithaweo to step in. And Fithaweo is kind of like, you want me to go and like help a young girl with like mirror stuff? Are you serious? Like, what are you talking about? And what she says, and I really, really like this, is essentially, you are the god of war, and she is fighting a war, even though maybe she doesn't know it. But war isn't just one thing. War isn't just a couple of armies meeting on a battlefield. That's the struggle. That is war. And she has plenty of that. So really, I do feel like this is in your wheelhouse. And I liked this. So, Thera is she's at the palace. She's reflecting, pun intended, on this lesson that she received about light and how it's waves. And all of a sudden she hears this really beautiful music. And there is a man, and he is playing what I interpret as a xylophone. From each beam hung 8 smooth bronze slabs of various thicknesses, each the size of a very large book. And this dude is playing this amazing music, and he's also not familiar to her. And he's got a lot of scars on him. He's really muscular, and he has extremely distinctive all black eyes. And Thera is just a little bit like concerned about this dude. And she's like, I don't think that an assassin could like get into our house, but also I don't know this dude. So she kind of comes at him trying to be diplomatic and is like, hey, I don't know what your name is. You want to tell me? And he immediately calls her out and is like, hey, I appreciate this. Not only are you trying to figure out who I am because you are worried, but you're doing it courteously, and you stepped in front of your sister in case I mean you harm to protect her, which you're very brave, and I appreciate all of this. And she's kind of like, fuck, I didn't mean to be that transparent, like shit. But he tells her that his name isn't important, and then says, do not blame the guards. I come and go as I please, and I play music for an audience in whom I have great hopes. We're all in search of the one true friend who can understand the voice in your heart when you play a hesitant tune on the moafia. I think it's moafia. And he explains to her about the instrument and talks about all of the different groupings of instruments that exists, the ones that are called like bamboo, which we would call like woodwind instruments. And silk is the name of stringed instruments. I thought that was pretty neat. I really liked that. And he says it's a hard instrument to make, a hard instrument to play, but it's even harder to make. And each slab must be cast to exact measurements to produce the right tune. Any flaw would mar the sound. And she is interested in all of this, and she asks him, well, how do you make sure that they're made properly? And he takes out a silk cloth, marked with a grid of dark lines, and beckoned Thera closer to examine one of the slabs. Thera saw that the bronze slab was also marked with a grid of lines, an exact echo of the lines on the silk cloth. The man wrapped the silk cloth around one of the slabs, ensuring that the grids matched up exactly. Then he picked up a mallet and struck the silk-wrapped slab. As the slab clanged, the grid on the silk seemed to come alive, vibrating everywhere with an even tremor. But in one corner, something seemed to be wrong. The grid appeared slightly out of alignment, and the tremors looked out of sync with the rest. And he says, have you ever tried to line up 2 identical pieces of silk and watch the patterns they make as the grids are overlaid and rotated? The principle is the same here. While the naked eye cannot see the imperfections in a cast slab, by using a reference grid such as this, it is possible to detect minute flaws during the casting process. This one will have to be recast. Even the gods aren't free from errors. I love that. He's giving her a real hint there about who he is, but she thinks that that's just, a manner of speaking, that that's just a turn of phrase he's using. So she stares at this grid on the vibrating silk, and she thinks about the interference of the waves of light on the lake. And as she's starting to get it, she thinks about the image in the mirror, and all of a sudden is interrupted by her sister going, "Where'd he go?" And she looks up and the man is just gone. Pretty great. I really enjoy this a lot. It's very different. Not to say that there weren't characters in previous books who knew that they had an interaction with a god, but she has had 2 interactions with people who can only be gods in the past 2 days. And I feel like that's a bit more than anybody else has gotten in these books so far. I feel like she is being particularly favored. And I find it extremely interesting. I like this. So Thera basically decides that she is going to figure this the fuck out. She is going to find out how to make this trick happen with these mirrors, because she knows now that's what it has to be. And she just immerses herself in this work. And then she gets a piece of news from Tunoa. So we go to chapter 27. We are in Tunoa, and we have the rebels led by Nodami and Doru Solofi. And they are urging on these rebels using the image of the hegemon and their mirrors as their motivation. They are relying so wholly on this that it makes me kind of laugh. And I appreciate later when Gin is talking to them about how everything went. Gin is able to see that shit is not what it looks like. She can tell that these guys had too much of a streak of good luck. This doesn't really make a lot of sense. And the way that these guys are relying on this mirror, it's not like it's a bad idea. It's obviously working. But if they are really convinced that nobody else is ever going to figure this out. And if, as things go, if someone were to, this sort of falls apart, but they seem so certain that they don't have to worry about it. And I find that just it's so short-sighted. You'd never put all your eggs in the one basket. I'm just saying, So Nodami gets up there and makes his speech about how the hegemon had prophesied that the 9th month of the 9th year was going to be super important. And this is not actually anything. They just invented this to lend some importance to the day that they began to put their plan into place. So let's see. Now that they were awash in funds, me and Solofi equipped all the rebels with gilded armor and even better weapons from Arulugi, as well as formal regalia for themselves as befitting their station as Tiro kings. There is a time for appearing as men of the people to gain their faith, as well as a time to appear to be above them to inspire awe. It was really too bad that they had to make do with their existing supply of magic mirrors to inspire the rebels in their cause. Noda often regretted not kidnapping the family of mirror makers while they were still alive. Now, see, this is what I'm talking about. If they have heard that these mirror makers are all dead, they should be glad, because that, in their mind, should assure them nobody is going to figure out that this is a trick. But this dude's out here being like, man, I really wish they were still alive and we could get them to make more, because then we could. And I'm like, but then you've got people, even if you kidnapped them, you've got people around that know the secret. They don't think things through. These guys are not good at their jobs, is what I'm saying. And he's feeling himself is really what's happening here. Like, all of the rebels who have really believed in this are with them. And now they're making enough money that even just like mercenaries are beginning to join up with them, because they recognize that these guys are going somewhere and have money behind them, and they can, you know, at least make a living off of this. So this is when Noda begins talking about the double nine would be a special day. Doru Solofi had to keep himself from laughing as he listened to Noda's bombast. He and Noda had hardly thought to endow the date of their discovery of the mirrors with such significance until much later, of course. But he supposed that if he squinted really hard, what Nodami was saying wasn't exactly a lie. And then talks about how, like, this was granted to them by the two goddesses, and how, well, the money that they got for it was given to them by two prostitutes who were of goddess quality. What a fucking goober. So then we go inside, and we have this fucking moment with Firo. Firo is, talk about not being real good at the job. He is trying, and he recognizes some of his mistakes. I'll say that for him. He realizes that he should have asked for help sooner, that he shouldn't have been so prideful. He wanted to assure his father that he could take care of things himself. But the news from Arulugi made him realize he was no longer in control as he had thought. The rebels had surrounded the Zindu castle. Firo and Rin weren't in immediate danger, as the castle, even after it had been turned into a shrine, still retained its ancient thick walls. Even the rebels seemed to have been surprised by their own success and had not come prepared with heavy siege machinery. I love this, that they're just like, oh shit, you're... Okay, we're at the walls? What do we do? Did you guys bring anything? I love this. They are not ready. Rin says, I didn't realize how much they had turned the population against us. In the past, imperial administrators were able to gather a lot of useful information from the villagers. Firo's glare made Rin think better of bringing up how the policy of outlawing all private veneration of the hegemon had likely played a role in souring the population against them. Reminder, that had been Firo's idea. And that's the thing. He's learning from his mistakes, I think. It seems that way. That being too harsh and forcing people out of being able to even think and say the things that they believe is going to backfire on you. People are going to resent it. People are going to fight back against that. And it may take time, but it'll happen. So as much as I understand Rin being like, you know what, I'm going to drop this line of communication and not go down this road because he's obviously mad about it. I hope that Firo is taking that to heart and recognizing what a mistake he made there. And he talks about how the mirrors have really like galvanized people, that folks really do believe that maybe the hegemon is like behind all of this. And eventually it turns out that their own soldiers do not want to fight back against these rebels because they believe that the hegemon is backing, the spirit of the hegemon is backing the rebels. When I say that Thera arrived in the nick of time, that cannot be overstated. She literally is like an angel sent from the heavens to help her brother's ass because he is this close to being slaughtered. And this whole rebellion is this close to completely taking off, to rocketing into a stratosphere that nobody will be able to control. It is so close. I am so glad that his opinion of his sister is described as worshipful, because she deserves that. She deserves to be worshipped. He should worship her. She is smarter than all of y'all. And I can't say anything but like that speaks more highly of Firo than the fact that he recognizes that. Because it's one thing to not really be as smart as other people. You're never going to be as smart as everybody. You know, I feel that I tend to be above average intelligence most of the time, but there are so many people out there who are just smarter than me. It's like really humbling sometimes to think about how fucking stupid I am. And that's the difference, right? Is when you are aware enough to recognize you don't know everything. You don't even know most things. And I think that's the key. And Firo has that. He is aware that he doesn't know everything and knows that his sister is super talented and impressive. Oh, bless him. I hope to God this means that if she does wind up taking power, he will be behind her and will recognize that this is the right thing. I hope. So there are 8,000 men coming at them. And the rebels attack on the fourth day. They keep waiting for this attack to happen, and it doesn't start. And then eventually, he notices how he says, Firo watched the brazen but chaotic scene in astonishment. The attackers were completely unprotected, and the defenders on the ramparts, ready with boiling pots of oil and night soil infused water, as well as rocks. That's horrifying, by the way. I never thought of that, but what better way, if you're going to just injure people, to ensure that they get like infections and die slow, terrible deaths that still thin the herd, but dumping actual shit on them? Makes sense. This is a mistake even the rawest of military commanders would not make. And Firo is just like, wow, I can't believe how bad they are at this. But the thing is, even though they're bad at it, they're good at motivating their men. And there are enough men at this point that they can lose some. And it's okay. It still winds up working. So Firo says, do what you can to hold them off. I'll be right back. And Firo, again, I will say this. As much as Firo has gotten himself into a bad situation here, I feel like he's trying to adapt. I feel like he he goes and he gets this portrait of the hegemon, and he flies that over the rampart, right where the rebel archers were about to shoot. It seemed only a matter of time before the walls would be breached. "Who dares to make another move?" shouted Prince Firo, who emerged at the top of the walls, breathing hard. He was holding up a portrait of Mata Zindu, which was usually hung in the main hall for the pilgrims who came to pray for the hegemon's blessing. But Firo now held it up like a giant shield and advanced on the attackers who were just about to overwhelm the ramparts. So he uses their piety against them. He gets this portrait and then lots of others, originals and copies, and places them all over the rampart so that these guys are loath to not just like rip through them, even to stain them. They don't even want to get like near them. And I love this. Nota Me and Doru Salafi are both screaming about how despicable and contemptible this is. He calls it a contemptible trick, which just like, all things considered, is really fucking rich. And I am so proud of Firo in this moment, y'all. I really am. Like, he just figured out what was motivating these guys and decided to use it. Now, would this have been long-term effective? Maybe not. But he buys some really valuable time, and it proves to me that he's beginning to try and think on more levels than the one which had been just purely go into battle, kill all the bad guys, which was obviously the way that he was approaching everything before. And Firo, even when they try and say that this is contemptible and despicable, Firo's like, well, I can't be that contemptible or despicable, or his portrait wouldn't even stay in my hands, which I love that. It doesn't make any sense, but these people are all extremely superstitious, so it doesn't have to make sense. It just has to feel like, you know, it just has to feel like it would work in a story, and that's enough. It's genius. So Nota Me is in the middle of, "You're indeed a son of that loathsome Kuni Guru." And they have this like back and forth. And eventually they get interrupted by this airship that shows up. And at first it turned, because Firo has finally actually sent some pigeons home asking for straight up aid. He was explaining to his father what was going on in the last letter, but he wasn't willing to actually be like, no, seriously, we need help. Please send people. Now he has. So he looks up and he thinks that that's what's happening, that this airship is coming to rescue him and save the day. But when he looks up, he's like, wait a second, hold on. That's a messenger ship. And there's no way that there's like an army on there. Who the hell? What is this? And then all of a sudden, somebody just comes flying out of the airship. Guys, if this isn't the most baller fucking move, I mean, this is, I just, it's like a Avengers level superhero bit here. I love it. Just as everyone was about to close their eyes, not willing to see the tragic impact with the earth, the diver let out a giant silk balloon on their back. The balloon puffed up and filled with air and slowed the descent of the rider. That was how the hegemon took Zudi years ago. A spirit? A messenger of the hegemon? Eventually, she spirals down and lands on the top of the walls. Again, like a boss. She could have landed anywhere. I like to believe that she was able to direct this, that she has like done enough study about physics that she has figured out how to direct this fucking thing. And he realizes that it's Thera. And I love this. What are you doing here? Saving your butt, apparently. Oh, Thera, never change. I love you. 3 waves of pigeons. I was sure you were on the verge of death. Since it would take too long to inform fathers... What is it? To inform father by the Amu Strait, I commandeered Time's arrow and came myself. Firo watched his big sister in undisguised admiration. He had always worshipped her, but now she seemed to have grown even more marvelous. I love it. I love it so much. So, she goes out and calls to all of them, followers of the hegemon, you have been misled. I am here to show you the truth of the hegemon's will. And she pulls a mirror out of her robes and holds it up so they can see the beautiful, highly polished surface. Everything around her was reflected in it perfectly. She raised an arm and pointed into the sky behind the rebels. Everyone turned and saw that the airship had stopped just behind the rebels. Long bamboo poles extended from both ends of the gondola from which a gigantic silk cloth was draped like an immense sail or curtain. Princess Thera tilted the mirror so that the bright sun struck it and threw a projection onto the screen. The defenders of Zindu Castle and the rebels of Tunoa alike were stunned into silence. So it's an image of the hegemon and Kuni with their arms around each other. And underneath it says, a noble brotherhood, loyal and true. Let not arms again cause Dara to rue. And they all drop their swords because it's that simple, which I just find amazing. And I'm not mad about it, but damn, it really was pretty simple. And Firo is just like, how the hell did you do that? And Thera orders for Nodami and Doru Salafi to be seized, but these 2 assholes have already fucking run off. Oh, I hate them so much. I hate them. Disgusted. So Thera shows Firo exactly how this was done. That there is like this lens that can detect the tiny, tiny little ripples in the surface of the mirror. And explains to him that this is how it works. She says, the light reflected from the mirror interferes with the light reflected by the lens itself. And if the surface is perfectly smooth, you'll see the rings as perfect circles. But if the surface is not perfectly smooth, you'll see the rings as deformed, revealing dips and protrusions undetectable by the naked eye. So, he is just super duper impressed. Wants to know how she learned to do this. And she's like, I had very good teachers. I figured out the secret. And I just love this. I love the 2 of them bonding. I love that she saved his ass. I love that he admired her already. And this isn't just her proving herself when he didn't really think she was like much to be reckoned with. He already thought she was a badass, and this just makes her more of a badass. And it would, wouldn't it? I mean, this is just shit you don't forget for the rest of your life. And she says, they relied on magic to fool their followers, but once we figured it out, the magic belonged to everyone. And I think that's really neat. I just, I'm wondering if she's going to like leak this information so that it becomes clearer that all of this is like had been a trick from the beginning. But I feel like that's not a good idea, because then it will like undo the effectiveness of what it is that she has done. Because it's not that these like, so here's the thing. Let's talk about our present political climate for a second. Really quick, I swear. Explaining to people that this was all a trick and that they have been duped is not effective. People don't get angry at the person who tricked them the way you would think. They get angry at the people who revealed the trick because they are embarrassed. They get angry at the people who saw through it or didn't fall for it at all because their pride is injured and they feel stupid. So while I could understand somebody being tempted to just release this information and be like, we need to show them that it was never anything, I think Thera's means of just utilizing the superstition that is already in place is smarter, because if she revealed that they had all been just duped, that's a blow to their pride that is very different than an instruction from the spirit of a godlike warrior. People are going to be much more willing to accept that than they are, I was just an idiot who got played. And, I don't like, it sucks, but I'm really beginning to realize how much sheer pride is a factor in people continuing to believe unbelievable shit simply because they've gone too long and too hard and they can't take it back now without feeling like a complete fool. And most of us that are of intelligence can admit that we don't know everything and that we are going to fuck up. And we see that as an opportunity for growth. But unfortunately, I wouldn't say the vast majority of people are like that. And it's just a matter of wanting to feel smarter than other people. And it's just a weird disconnect between wanting to feel smarter and actually trying to be smarter. There's an effort involved in one. And then there's just an assumption of inherently being by the other. And most people want to inherently be. They do not want to work and grow and do better. So anyway, that's my understanding of this. So then we go to Gin Mazzotti. I am highly disappointed in Gin here. She is not playing this as intelligently as I thought. She does see through that these men had it too easy, that things went too well, that there's something else happening here. But Gin doesn't dismiss them and turn them in the way that she should have because her pride is injured. Pride is just a big theme, is what I'm realizing. So these guys are like literally kneeling before her, banging their heads on the floor, begging for her help until there's like bloody patches on the stone. And it says specifically that the stone is pockmarked and in need of repair, which I think is a detail that is significant. So she says, "You've committed treason against the emperor. What good is pleading for mercy from me?" Nota parsed Gin's words. I keep wanting to call her Gin. Gin's words carefully. The very fact that Gin was asking questions instead of throwing them into a prisoner wagon bound for pawn was a good sign. The fact that she spoke of the emperor and herself in two separate sentences was another. So he says that basically we overestimated ourselves. We can only blame our own greed and ambition for our sorry state and know that death is our just desert. Emperor Reagan is truly peerless in the arts of war and a commander of men without equal. And Nota is doing this on purpose because he is trying to get her to want to prove herself and is trying to make her feel as if people are giving the emperor credit for her work. He knows how to play her. And she says something to herself later about like, listen, I know what they're doing, but I have to admit it's working. And I'm like, Gin, why is it working? If you know what they're doing, these guys should be despicable to you. I hate that this manages to work. Like, your pride is really, that has been a problem. That is Gin's greatest weakness easily, is her pride. This has been an issue in the last book as well. We saw how her relationship with Luan basically deteriorated because she was unwilling to like make herself vulnerable and actually reach out to him. He wanted to be with her and loved her, and she was too intent on like making her a name for herself, not wanting to look dependent on him, and also feeling like every time he took issue with something that she said, that it was him doubting her. She was just extremely sensitive about certain things, to the point that it like wound up eating away at the trust that they had between them. And it was such a shame. When we were in Luan's head, it was like, it's so clear how much he loves her and how much he wanted things to be different. And it really seems like her takeaway from everything is feeling like she doesn't think he ever loved her the way that she wanted him to. And it's like, no, he could have, and he was trying, and you kind of wouldn't let him. Like, what more do you want from the guy? But anyway, so he says, you showed mercy once and let us go. We pray that you again repeat that act of courage. And she said, and they said, in war, it has always been the rule that nobles are treated differently from common men at arms. And she says, I suppose that's true. You certainly deserve a fate far worse than the fools who followed you. I doubt you'll find a single lord of Dara who would disagree on this point. And they are like, well, maybe, but you're not like the other lords of Dara. You have the emperor's ear in a way that the others don't. You're the only one that can bring your sword into the palace. And if he is going to listen to somebody regarding giving us a pardon, I guess, I'm not sure if that's quite the right word, a reprieve, it would be you. And she's sort of like, well, you do have a point. I probably would be the one that they listen to. But she wasn't so foolish as to want to risk her reputation for the likes of Nodami and Doru Solofi. She was far more curious about the fact that the two of them had gotten as far as they had and managed to drag Theka Kimo into their plot as well. Considering how much effort Rin Koda had put into the Imperial security apparatus, something didn't smell right. So this is what I'm interested in, because it's clear that she is piecing things together, but I don't know if she is at all aware that it's Gia that is behind this, like, I feel like Gia has been really careful to kind of distance herself from all the work she's doing and keep herself out of it and make her touches and manipulations here and there subtle enough that tracing them back to her would be pretty difficult. So Gin is like figuring out something isn't right, but not enough and not soon enough to do anything to defend herself against what is coming. And what I am afraid is coming is basically charges of treason and maybe either an execution or at the very least being like lowered somehow. She's a queen at present. I don't know if she can be demoted or if she can simply be removed from her office as like general. That feels like the least of what could go wrong here. I'm worried for her safety, to be perfectly honest. So we go to Zomi. And I have to be honest, guys, I had totally forgotten about the conversation that Gia has with Zomi and how Gia has gotten Zomi to believe that she is on Gin's side in things. So Zomi is walking with Gin's daughter, Aya. And it turns out that like Gin got knocked up and never told anybody who the father is. And we wind up finding out that it is Luanzia, but it's not like, she basically considers it nobody's business. All of these like different emperors, kings, lords, they can get women pregnant and have children out of wedlock, and nobody says a goddamn word to them. As far as she is concerned, she should get that same privilege. So she hasn't told anybody who the father is, and nobody has ever dared to ask. We wind up finding out because Gin seems to smell the tide turning, and she tells Zomi, because I think she is worried she may not survive, and somebody needs to know so that they can tell Luan. And it's sort of sweet because it's Luan's child, and because of how Zomi was like taken care of by Luan, it's almost like Aya is her sister, you know? And I kind of think that's sweet, and I hope that Zomi and her continue to have like a good relationship. I believe Zomi when she says that she will protect Aya no matter what. I am a fan of the direction this is going in. So Zomi is noticing how like that one of the people in this crowd of rebels is the guy that had menaced her in that bar, I guess is the word. As soon as Zomi saw Doru Solofi's shifting mien, arrogant and groveling by turns, she had recognized him as the brute who had attempted to extort her and the other patrons of the three-legged jug years ago. Unsettled by emotions and memories she had long pushed out of her mind, Zomi had avoided going to the queen, as she did not trust herself to offer objective counsel. But the queen had summoned her, and Zomi was glad to run into the Princess Aya on the way to the audience hall. It would delay the unpleasant discussion a little further. So we get a little bit of Aya on the way here. And Aya is basically like, well, if they're traitors, Mom should fucking kill them. Like, what are we even doing? Aya is a little bit of a Firo, as it turns out. She is into war. She is a little bit too decisive, maybe. Clearly is like a rule follower in a way. And I'm interested in this. I like it. Let's see. Gin Mizoti had never shied away from letting her daughter know how she came by her throne, and Zomi was used to the way the princess spoke easily of killing and warfare. In truth, since her arrival in Gejira, she had been working to moderate some of Gin's more militaristic instincts to administer the realm with a gentler hand. For instance, she had encouraged Gin to freeze the military budget and divert more funds into building village schools for the poor, modeled on the learning huts of Old Han. She was using them to experiment with a new curriculum that emphasized writing in the vernacular and practical skills like mental arithmetic and geometry that eschewed proofs. Gin had been far more amenable to her suggestions than the imperial bureaucracy, and Zomi felt that she was finally finding a perch from which she could shine. Gin's generous stipend also allowed her to send a lot more money home to Dasu. Everything in her life seemed to be moving in the right direction, to which I'm like, oh, Zomi, don't count your chickens, girl. I don't like it. So they spot this dude who is, he has this stone that's like 200 pounds, and he would throw it up in the air and catch it and set it down. And this is apparently just something that he does to amuse himself, to keep his strength up. So all of the other prisoners are just kind of like, or fugitives, I guess they are. They're not even paying attention to this. But Aya is like, wow, you must be super strong. Are you serious? And this gets Zomi pulled into the conversation as well. And he talks about how his father left before he was born, that he always wanted to like be like his father, and that he had heard the stories about how, the Marshal of Matazindu had been weak as a child, but then worked to strengthen himself by carrying a calf. And he wanted to do the same thing. So he works to get strong. And Zomi can tell that he's like kind of a kindred spirit in terms of having a difficult life and working really hard to get where he is. And she... she says something like, she thought of her brothers who had died because a noble called for them to fight. She thought of the way Princess Thera had managed to get her into the grand examination with a single word. We suffer because we are the grass upon which giants stride. Ooh, if that isn't a word. So at this point, Mota says, I wish I had listened to my mother, though, who didn't want me to fight at all. She said the great lords like King Noda and King Doru like to gamble, but it's always the people who have to scrabble for a living who pay the price. Zomi said nothing. My mother will make whoever hurts you pay, said Aya. She's a greater lord than them all. Ah, dear. Zomi went around to talk to the other fugitives. Some were scholars who had failed to place in the imperial examination and hoped to find an outlet for their talent. Some were desperados who thought of the rebellion as an opportunity to accumulate wealth. But most were simple young peasants, like Motakifi, who fought because they were told it was the right thing to do, and they trusted the nobles to know better. Yo, that's war. People are told a story about why what they're doing is noble, is honorable, is right, is in defense of people who cannot defend themselves. And it's so rarely ever about anything of the sort. And this is what makes her really not agree with the tactic that Gin is taking, where she is thinking that she might defend these fucking nobles and instead hand over all of these rebels to suffer instead. Zomi is just like, are you serious? It would be wrong to offer up Noda and Doru's followers. That they would even suggest a thing is beyond the pale. And Gin said, I can't offer them up. They came to me thinking I could save their lives. I would have no shred of honor left if I didn't even try. And Zomi starts to say, you're talking about saving face. And Gin interrupts her and says, honor is everything. And I'm like, yeah, if honor is everything, you're doing a really dishonorable thing. She's right about saving face. This is your pride. Honor and pride are not the same. And she is conflating them. And Zomi says, why offer up their followers? And Gin says, things are changing. I wasn't asked to lead the war against Stekokimo. They didn't come to me to get aid for the situation in Tunoa. And we wind up finding out that Gin wasn't asked because Kuni knows that Gin has relationships with some of these people, and he felt like it was going to be weird for her. I'm not sure why he thinks she can't compartmentalize after everything that they have been through, but he has his own reasons for not asking her. And she is ascribing intent to it that isn't necessarily there. And I assume that this was something to do with like Gia's instruction or meddling as well. And she says someone powerful in Pan is plotting against those who have done the most to bring about the rise of the House of Dandelion. And she says, if you think it's the Empress, I must say that you are wrong. And she can't tell Gia that she had this conversation, but we know that like that's exactly, or she can't tell Gin, Jesus. She can't tell Gin that she had the conversation with Gia. And even if she could, like we know that it's bullshit. But that's what she's got to go on because poor Zomi is being played. Ugh, the poor thing. You speak of honor in shielding Noda and Doru, yet you would give up their followers to assure the Emperor. I do not think the two can be reconciled. Gin laughed bitterly. Consistency has always been a trap into which only small minds wish to leap. Nah, girl. You're just fucking rationalizing shit now. Are you certain you're not simply offering protection to Noda and Doru to see if you still have the Emperor's trust, to see that you are still the Marshal of Dara in his heart? So she's doing this on purpose to test him, and it looks like that test does not pay off. We'll see. So she tells Gin about the men that that they are following these two basically usurpers because they have talents that they want to put to use, because they had ambitions, and that they are useful, that they are people that could be turned into major players if she decided to like take advantage of them. And Prince Firo is young and rash, while Duke Kota is embarrassed at having almost lost against the rebels. It's natural that they'd portray these men as unredeemable traitors. Presently, the Emperor is enraged by Theko Kimo's betrayal, and if you hand these men over, he will no doubt execute them only to regret the decision later. Blood begets blood, Your Majesty, and Dara cannot afford more blood. And Gin basically is like, listen, I kind of suspect that maybe this has to do with your biases because all of these people come from humble beginnings and you kind of see yourself in them and you want me to go easy on them because you have a bit of a biased outlook. And Zomi says, I am not the only one that was once just like them. You also were a peasant. You also came, but apparently you don't fucking remember that. I loved this argument. And Zomi is just so sure that she is doing the right thing. She says, do what is right for Dara, no matter the consequences. She remembers that this is the advice that Gia gave her. Tell Noda and Doru's men to move into the greatest quarters with their lords. Tonight we feast and welcome them all to Gejira. So, Zomi is giving her advice to be careful with these guys, and that is the exact advice that winds up sort of biting Gin in the ass because it makes it look like she is offering comfort and succor to traitors. I think if she had gotten rid of the two leaders, at least it could be said that she was keeping the others around for their usefulness. But because she doesn't do anything to anybody, this is real, real bad. So we have then chapter 29. I only have a few minutes left. But Kogo Yelu is talking to Kuni. And it turns out that Kuni is trying to go off into war. He wants to get involved hands-on. Puma Yemu has always been so effective, said Gia. One wonders why this war is going so poorly. Kogo looked at the Empress and was about to speak, but then thought better of it and kept his mouth shut. Yeah, Kogo, you got played. Are you figuring that out yet, buddy? I can't tell if he knows that's what happened or if he just thinks he didn't do as good a job at what she told him as he should have. Things are going precisely the way she wanted. But does he think that he could have kept this more in hand if he had just been better at the job? Because that's sort of heartbreaking that he might be blaming himself, you know? Kogo, it's not you, dude. I don't know what Puma is thinking, said an irritated Kuni. I don't seem to know my generals. Or no, you know what? Kogo isn't the one. Rinkoda's the one, right? Rinkoda's the one that she played. I'm getting them confused, I think. All right, so Gia says that he should summon Queen Gin. And he says, I thought it would be awkward for her to fight against one of her old friends. And now that things are going poorly, you want me to crawl to her for help? Will you make me the laughingstock of Dara? To which I'm like, dude, why would that make you the laughingstock? You can explain to her that you were trying to keep her from being in a strange position, but that you realize that you made an error and that she is extremely talented and useful and is the person that you should have trusted to do this from the beginning. And it would be okay. But now he's all wrapped up in his fucking pride as well. And Gia says she did win Dara for you. And basically tries to be well, she's the one responsible for your success. And it's an insult. I mean, she's not entirely wrong, but she is making Kuni feel everybody thinks you're where you are because of her. You don't know what you are doing, and you depended on her to get the job done because you're not very good at that part of the job, which motivates him immediately to step forward and do too much without asking for her help because he is trying to prove something also. It is embarrassing how easy this is to do. Honestly, it is. Kuni, I underestimated you earlier in this book because I didn't think that you would understand the potential of your own daughter. But I overestimated your ability to rein in your fucking pride. Because, dude, you are falling for this shit so hard that it's just cringe-inducing to me. And it's like, all of your people deserve better. All of your people have done so much for you, and they all deserve more than for you to get caught up in a fucking dick measuring contest. Like, come on, dude, what are you doing? So Kogo she asks him what his counsel is. And he says, I am certain the emperor will do what is right for Dara, as will the empress and consort Rosanna. And she's like, come on, you don't have to be all like careful about this. If you think I've made a mistake, say it. And he's like, well, I think that maybe bringing that up was a bad idea. And he says, well, yeah, I mean, he's got vanity. And Gia's like, yeah, exactly. And he realizes that she fucking did this shit on purpose and is like, again, realizing that maybe he's playing a game that he doesn't entirely know the rules to. The emperor may have, at one time or another, reprimanded all of his generals and advisors except you and Luan. Luan stays away from the court, while you are as smooth as a polished piece of jade. And he says that he is just a loyal servant. And she says, oh yeah? Are you? Like, of anybody who winds up being emperor? And he says, of course. And she says, remember that, and leaves. And he winds up like wiping off his neck because he's broken out into a fucking sweat. So Kuni goes away, and this leaves Gia as imperial regent. Ta-da! So she gets all of the ministers together, and everybody is sort of talking about how, because, you know, she reassures everybody. They're all sort of not sure what to make of her at first. She goes and like visits all the soldiers and, you know, goes and oversees things. Everyone at court whispered that Empress Gia was indeed an extraordinary woman, surpassing others of her sex like the deer and surpassed all other fish, a much needed, careful, and stabilizing influence. On the 9th day after the emperor left, Gia summoned all of Kuni's ministers and generals who were in the capital to formal court. So this is when she's basically like, so let's talk about Gin and all of the shit that she has pulled. And it's basically like one thing after another that does seem rather damning. She says, when Theko Kimo rebelled, Jin Mozoti never came to Pan to offer her aid. When Nodami and Doru Solofi escaped to Noah, they went to her and she offered them refuge. When she attended court 5 years ago, she spoke rudely to me while conspicuously flaunting her friendship with consort Rosanna. When Akashima lost her pass to enter the grand examination, Gin Mozoti offered her aid in secret, thereby hoarding for herself the loyalty of a talented person, which we know that Gia was the one who suggested that she go to Gin, but she did that to make it seem like Gin was trying to grab up somebody. And Kogo says that there needs to be ironclad proof. And she says spies have returned from Gejira. Queen Mozoti feasts every night with Nodami and Doru Solofi. And everybody in the room says that they serve the emperor and the empress. So she summons Gin. And Gin knows all is not well. She gets put in the usual quarters that she is kept in. And she is waiting for people to come and visit her the way that they do. Gin went to the quarters assigned to her in the guest complex right outside the walls of the palace. This was where visiting nobles and important officials from the provinces stayed when they came to the capital on business. Gin settled in with a pot of tea and conversed with Zomi Kidosu, certain that soon generals and ministers who wished to curry favor with her would come to visit. But no one came for most of the afternoon. And eventually, once somebody does come, he doesn't know what's going on. He hasn't been around. So Gin realizes, like, things are really bad. The only person who has been willing to visit is somebody who hasn't been around to feel the tide turning and to realize that maybe this isn't where he wants to be. And eventually she asks him, like, because he is the guy who started off as a butcher, whom we met before. She asks, does he ever wish that he had just stayed a butcher? And he's like, no, shit. Why would I want that? And she's like, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't always go too well, does it? And he's just like, I don't know what you even mean. And he really doesn't. And he finishes his tea, and that's just like, he's like, well, I'll see you around. And he leaves. And Gin is just sitting there like, will you? And that is the end of the chapter. So, yikes. I am soups curious about what's next. I'm way over time, so I gotta run. But thank you very much to Kyle again for commissioning this episode. I'm excited for the next one. And I will be seeing you all again soon. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.